FSB. FSB.
Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining us today at our FSB National webinar on Getting It Right with Image Copyright. So I'm Ruth Lambert, I'm one of the development managers with the Federation of Small Businesses, and I cover Somerset and Wiltshire, but the issue we're talking about today is really a national one, which is why we're running it for everybody, just so that we can all be aware and try not to get caught out. So I'll shortly be having a discussion with our two guest speakers here today, and I'd like to thank them so much for taking part in this. Special thanks go to Graham Bayliss, who suggested this session from Serendipity Online Marketing, and Graham Everett is our resident expert here today, so from Copyright Correct. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Just to say that today's session will be recorded, and it's going to be available on our on-demand webpage on the FSB website. So if you miss anything, want to watch back again, or maybe want to send it to someone else to watch, it'll be available there. And I just wanted to say, if you're not yet an FSB member, we'd love to have the opportunity to speak to you further about that, about the benefits of joining, because we do a lot more than just the webinars. So if you're interested in that, do have a look at our website at www.fsb.org.uk, and you can book a meeting with a membership advisor. Okay, so gentlemen, I'd just like to ask you both to briefly introduce yourselves, please. So Graham Everett, would you like, it's very confusing today, ladies and gentlemen, because you know, you're both Graham. So
I know. Well, first of all, I'd say it's
first.
very early to be talking about copyright infringement, isn't it? Past 9 in the morning, but but anyway, here we go. So I've had 25 years experience of working in the stock library industry. So I've quite often been on the other side. I've been the one sending out the copyright infringement letters to various businesses and individuals for committing copyright infringement, protecting a photographer's rights. But then a few years ago, I realized that a lot of the people who've committed copyright infringement, it wasn't malicious. They didn't do it on purpose. It was purely through lack of education, not in a general sense, but purely with regard to copyright infringement. So we set up Copyright Correct to check business websites, to look at the images and to tell them which images are okay to use and which ones aren't, and also to give advice on copyright infringement, and not to try and stop it happening in the first place, rather than, you know, saying to people, well, you know, you've received a letter and you shouldn't have received this letter, but, you know, to try and educate people and stop it happening. That's the most important thing.
That's great. Thank you, Graham. And Graham B, what about you? Tell us about
Well, good morning, everybody. Yes, Graham Bayliss. I've been doing what I do, which is SEO, like getting people to people's websites for 22 years now. And I came across the issue of copyright infringement by being caught. And I'm here to tell you about my experiences, about how it all happened and how nasty it was, and to help you not get caught like I was.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the way we're going to structure this today is we're going to have a bit of a discussion. So we haven't got any slides. We've got a series of discussion points that I'm going to discuss with the two gentlemen here, and then that should take probably about half an hour-ish, and then after that we'll be able to address any questions that you might want to ask. So I have got a whole list of questions here that you kindly submitted when you registered, but if anything comes to mind that you'd like to ask that you haven't sent through already, please do use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you put it in the chat, it makes it a bit trickier for me to track it, so please do use the Q&A, and we can have them all in one place there, and we'll try and address as many of your questions as possible. If you don't have a chance to get your question addressed, we'll have the contact details for both Grahams at the end, and you'd be very welcome to contact them directly. But we're going to kick off the session with a poll, so let's get your thoughts on your experiences with copyright so far. So Joya and Hayley, who are running this session, are just launching the poll. So the question is, have you or someone you know been told you are guilty of copyright infringement for using an image? So yes, no, or not sure. I'll just see what we get. Just interesting to know whether you've come today because you've had a problem with this or because you want to make sure you never have a problem with this. Lovely, we're almost there. Thank you. I think we can probably publish that now. So the majority of people haven't had a problem with image copyright. So that's great to hear. We don't wish problems on you, but it's just interesting to know the audience. But about 29% have. So I guess they'd be interested to know how they should handle that next time, or maybe they're in the middle of handling it and want to know how to do it. So thank you for taking the time.
The not sures are interesting because I think you'd know if you received one or not.
Well, maybe they work for an organization and they're not quite sure whether someone else might have had an issue with it, I guess. Okay, so let's kick this off with the question, what is copyright and why is it important?
Well, before I did that, what I think I wanted to do, Ruth, it just very quickly, because you've got FSB members are photographers too, so I didn't want this session for photographers watching to say, look, we don't agree with copyright infringement. All these poor companies are receiving letters because they've used images. So if there's any photographers watching now, and it's quite important, we're not here to defend copyright infringement. Photographers, copyright holders, they have a right to defend their copyright. And the letters, the infringements which have gone out to companies or individuals, they're perfectly legal, they're perfectly acceptable. What we're trying to do here today is educate people and try and stop it from happening in the first place, just to try and give people heads up. And so any photographers watching, because I know there are some, I don't want them to think, well, I've got every right to defend my copyright, and that's not what we're here for. It's to try and stop it happening in the first place. So, but moving on from that, I deal with copyright all day long, and I was thinking a couple of days ago, what is copyright? And I know what it is. And when sometimes something is, what it is, but it's hard to explain to somebody else what it is. So if you don't mind, I looked on actually looked on the government website for the Intellectual Property Enterprise Court, which is where you would go if you were defending copyright. So if you don't mind, I'm going to borrow from them. So copyright, it's the exclusive right given to the creator for a fixed number of years for the use of their creative work. So as a photographer, it gives you the right to license or sell, and gives you the legal right to protect your work. The two big things in the UK is, one, you don't have to register copyright. In America, you have to register your copyright. If it's a painting, an image, music, whatever, you register. In the UK, we're a little bit more relaxed about it. When you create any type of creative work, let's call it a photograph, because that's what we're talking about in this instance, not music, it is automatically copyrighted. So for 70 years from the date of that creation, you're clear, that's okay. But the important thing for us today is the letters that people receive if they've committed copyright infringement. That law, that thing enshrined in British law, gives the photographer or the license holder the right to protect their copyright, and it gives them the right to sell their copyright for a fee. So if you're using those images without permission, those photographers and those stock agencies have every right to contact you and charge a fee, receive compensation for using the image without a license, basically.
So are all images copyright? I mean, everything from professional photographers down to something I might take on my phone?
Yes. So if you took a picture on your phone, it's automatically copyrighted. I mean, the thing is, when we take pictures on our phone, it usually doesn't become an issue because they don't go anywhere. They go to friends and family, Facebook, and no one's going to pinch a picture of you and your family or your children or birthday cake, the reason people don't realize they're copyrighted is not because they're not, it's because it's never become an issue. So, but they are, everything is copyrighted. I think that there was a big thing in America recently where a Hollywood celebrity, I think it was Bradley Cooper, took a picture of Lady Gaga, and he took a picture on his mobile phone, and that picture went all around the world of those two at the Oscars. But the point is, the copyright to that image, everyone was using it, every newspaper, every PR agent, it was his copyright because he'd taken it. And it was quite a good discussion, actually, because he owned the copyright automatically, although in America you do have to register it, but in the UK, for example, that copyright would have been his. So what I would say, assume, if there's businesses watching it, assume every image is copyrighted. It may not be, but just for your practice, so you don't receive a letter charging you thousands of pounds, assume every image is copyrighted. So that's a photograph, it's a painting, it's computer generated images. If you it's everything. The other side is public domain images. So we spoke earlier about in the UK that after 70 years, an image no longer is in copyright. Those images become part of the public domain. So I think a lot of people would have seen images on the wiki images. So you see an image for Wikipedia where you can see it, so you can download this image for free. But even then, I've seen people being caught for copyright infringement because they've not credited Wiki, or they've not created the Creative Commons license. So even when you're downloading an image for free from the Creative Commons, you still have to give the correct license, and it will tell you all this when you download an image within the public domain. You have to copy and paste a certain link to give a credit to the photographer or to the person who owns the copyright. So it's really so no image is free, basically. And if you take that as your rule of thumb, you won't get into trouble.
Yeah, because you talk about a 70-year gap in pretty much in the UK. What happens if you found a 70-year-old or 75-year-old image of Mickey Mouse on the web and used it? And our friends Disney, being particularly litigious, would they say, "I don't care, 75 years old, and still chase you, because it's Mickey Mouse"?
Well, what they would have done, Gren, they would have re-copyrighted it.
Oh, so you can do that then? You can keep copyrighting.
Well, the classic example of that is the Beatles. They did not copyright their images, so who bought them? Michael Jackson went in, waited for the moment they became in the public domain, purchased, and now so every time Paul McCartney has to play Hey Jude, he had to pay Michael Jackson. Right.
So the 70-year rule can actually not really be 70 years because someone else has bought it or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That makes it even more dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah, or even if they haven't bought it, it's in the public domain, you still have to give a credit. You still have to give the public domain license underneath. That's what people. So recently, I dealt with somebody who used an image on their business blog, and it was within the public domain. They got it from Wiki Images, but they received a copyright infringement letter because they hadn't credited. They hadn't used the correct credit underneath. So this is really important. It's not just about using the image; it's about giving the photographer the moral right to a credit.
Every image out there seems to me, from the other side, to be like an unexploded bomb. It might go off, it might not. So perhaps it's best not to pick it up in the first place.
If you saw Ferrari with some cars in it, would you pinch it? With some keys in it, would you? You wouldn't, would you? It's the same with a picture.
Yeah, and somebody's put in the Q&A. Does that apply to company logos as well?
It depends. If you create your own company, so I have a company logo, but I ensured that that I created it, that the image was mine, and so it was drawn by an artist, basically. But you could. So there are computer generated images where you can. I mean, Getty stock libraries like Getty, Alamy, Shutterstock. They don't just supply photographs; they supply computer generated images. GIFs and things. If you use one of those as your company image, you could be caught for copyright infringement. So again, but if your company is unique, surely you want to generate your own image anyway. So use a photographer, create your own image. Don't get one from a stock library because someone else may have the same image anyway. So it's kind of.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And actually, you mentioned putting images on Facebook. So are the rules the same no matter where you use an image? Is it stricter if you're going to use it in a more permanent place than something a bit more transitory than Twitter?
The rules apply everywhere, but I know for a fact that the companies who are chasing images, so the image infringement companies that you will receive the letter from, or photographers, for example, they do tend to look in certain areas and they are not looking at other areas so much. So it's easier to find an image used on your business website, for example. But every image is copyrighted. So I've had other examples where people have been selling paintings of photographs on Etsy and on Amazon. So I think the best way to help people listening to it is to give examples sometimes. So I'm working with a photographer at the moment, and he's a well-known, he's quite a well-known music. He photographs musicians, very famous musicians. So he took an album cover, took a photo. This picture of this musician on this album cover appears all over Amazon as people selling the painting of this picture. So he is now going after them for copyright infringement because they basically copying his photograph. So this is on Amazon, it's on Etsy, it's on eBay. So these areas do, you know, they count too, but they are not being, the image infringement companies aren't looking at them quite as much. But so the main area is your business website. So say if you have a business, you have a website, any image on there can be open to copyright infringement. And one of the areas that is, you know, we need to look at is areas like blogs. So, you know, if you're blogging on your business website, quite often third parties, so people outside your company, outside of your, even of your own industry, may place an image or place a post on your blog within your business. You may not even know they've done it, you know, because they put, or the other example is you're using an intern or a temporary member of staff, and you say, you know, what work we could give them. Oh, you know, let's give them the blog. You know, they can upload pictures, and you don't know what they're doing. And suddenly they're uploading images or sharing images onto your blog page on your business website. These are all open to copyright infringement. You will receive a letter from a photographer or a stock library or one of the companies who are working on their behalf, like Pixabay or Image Rights, and they will, you know, they will catch you at some point. Not tomorrow, but at some point.
Is it the person who did it who is liable, or the business that's liable?
Unfortunately, it's the business which is liable. So a lot of people, when they receive it, they say, well, I've used a website designer. Website designers, and if there's any watching, I'm not criticizing them, you know, because they're great, but 99% of website designers know copyright law. They know they have to purchase an image, and they have to get a license for that image, and they have to put it on their company's website, and they have to tell the person they're buying the image from where they're using that image. Some website designers I've seen still, it's incredible, still don't consider what they do for a living. You know, they're working with websites, images. They still go onto Google and right click and download an image and say, and use it. And then what happens is, it's not the website designer, it's the business. The end user is responsible.
The website owner could in theory countersue the website designer, couldn't they? Any sort of instances for doing something wrong. But you're right, the initial weight would fall on the website owner.
Yeah, Graham, it would. And I'm going to give an example now. So I'm here in lovely Devon, and there's a very large brewery here who I've worked with who used a website designer. This brewery own many pubs in the southwest. And on each of their menus online, they had a picture of a roast dinner. Beautiful picture, white plate, roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, carrots. You would think it's not difficult to photograph, but actually it's a really, I work with a lot of photographers, it's really difficult to photograph that, to make it look really appetizing and really nice. And so this website designer right-clicked on Google, downloaded it, and used it on every single pub within this business, 60 pubs. When you go onto Google, if you click on double click on an image on Google, and it will say, Google do covenants, it says this image may be subject to copyright. The interesting word there is maybe. It may not, it may be in the public domain, but it says don't right click and use this image. So this website designer uses this image on 60 pubs. So there was a copyright infringement letter for 60 pubs owned by this brewery. I mean, I'm talking tens, I mean, actually, I think it was about 140, 150,000 pounds. And when I spoke to the website designer, he wasn't remotely sorry, because he just did not understand copyright law. He just said, well, I got it off Google. And I looked in, and you couldn't argue with him. But most website designers are brilliant. They understand this. And I couldn't believe, as a website designer, he didn't understand it. So this brewery got a very large bill, a huge bill. I mean, crippling. So Ruth, it's, you know, it's interesting. You have to be so careful. So
how can you, like, what's the right way to go about it then, if you want an image? And how can you protect yourself?
The right way to go about it, as Graham has probably found out, is buy it. So first of all, there are stock libraries. I'm sure most people watching will know what a stock library is. So an example would be Getty, Shutterstock, Alamy. There are also lots of lovely specialist stock libraries who specialize in certain subjects. So Getty's like Tesco, really. They have images of everything, whereas you could get View Pictures, who specialize just in architecture. Stock Food specialize just in food. So you purchase your image and you will buy a license to use that image, and then that invoice, which you will create from buying that picture, that's your license to use that picture. So just buy it. The other one is photographers, if they're watching, commission a photographer. Very simple. If you want unique images on your website, get a photographer. It's, you know, as simple as that. You get your own images, they're yours, no one else can use them. But there is an issue, there is an area here I want to discuss, is that if you are a business owner and you commission a photographer, you don't own the copyright. The photographer owns the copyright, you don't. So you cannot share those images, you cannot give them to anybody else, you can't give them to your suppliers. So those images are yours and they're yours to use however you like. So basically, if you want an image, either buy it, commission it, or if you're given an image, get it in writing from the photographer that you have permission to use it. I'm really warbling on here, aren't I? I do apologize, but I hope it's interesting. But it's important stuff. If you are given images, if somebody shares, so say, I'll give an example. If you were an architect and you commissioned a photographer, or you were a food company and you commissioned a photographer, and you had those images, and say if one of your clients came to you and said, oh, we worked on that building, oh, we supplied the ingredients to you for that product, and they said to you, can we have some images? We see you've got some lovely images, and they then shared the images with you. It's called third-party use. And say if you're the landscape gardener working within that project, that building, and you shared the images, well, the people who you're sharing the images didn't buy those images, they didn't commission the photographer. So why should the photographer give those images for free to the other companies? They shouldn't. You wouldn't, you know, no one else would like it if you would, you know, had a product and you were sharing it with everybody and not paying for it.
I think it's very easy to explain that, you know, when you have your wedding and you get photographers, you know, to take it, you have to buy every print from that photographer. You know, you can't copy it yourself and give it to friends. So it's a bit like that, really. Every time you use that image, you have to have that photographer's, you know, permission to use it. It's all down to permission, really, isn't it, Graham? Yeah, it is. And you know, when you buy a song off of Amazon, you're buying the license, you're not buying the song. You'd be laughing if you were. Imagine buying Hey Jude. You mean you'd pay your mortgage off within a week, wouldn't you? You're buying the license. So the thing, a lot of people don't realize, when they commission a photographer, they're not buying the copyright, they're buying the license to use those images. And then when they start sharing them with other businesses, saying, yeah, it's fine, you can use these. And what happens is another business then will put them on their website, and then they receive a copyright infringement letter. And then what happens is that business goes back to the original business and says, you gave me these images, you said they were fine to use. And they said, oh yeah, well, you can. And then the photographer says, well, no, I never said that. In my contract, it said only you can use them. It said no third-party use. And this is why I'm here today, is to try and educate businesses to say, if you receive any image for free from anyone who you work with, any business you have financial dealings with, say, yep, you can use these, treat it with a pinch of salt. Don't go, oh, brilliant, they sent me some images, it saves me having to do with it. What you need to do is contact the photographer or ask who the photographer is and say, where did you get these images from? Can I use them? And get it in writing, not from the business, because the business who's given you the images will say, yes, it's fine. You need it in writing from the copyright holder, the photographer, or, you know, or from the stock library. I believe you've actually have some contracts you produce for photographers, haven't you? To make it easy for them to provide their work. Spells it out in black and white exactly how the people who use their photographs can use them, basically.
Yeah. So I work with photographers and businesses. I work with both. I'm kind of like was it poacher turned gatekeeper? Was that the right thing? So I work with photographers. I've written them a contract so businesses can read it and say, oh, I didn't realize I couldn't do that. I didn't know I couldn't do this. So I've written it in sort of layman's terms, so a photographer can give his contract terms and conditions to businesses and go, well, thank God, I had no idea. You know, I shut up now. I've been talking for too long.
So how can you tell if an image is okay to use then, basically? There doesn't seem to be an easy way of doing it.
You can't, Graham. You can't.
And actually, but that brings us nicely onto the topic of these websites where you're supposed to be able to get copyright-free images, things like today and stuff. So what do you think about those? Because, you know, a lot of people use those a lot for social media posts and things.
I'm not a great fan. I have to be very careful. First of all, I'm going to say, I will say, if you look at those sites, the images aren't very high. They're not great. They're not the highest of quality. And if you're a unique business, the point of having a website is you want great images. Sell your website. People don't realize this. When you click on a website, the first thing people look at are your pictures. They don't look at your text of what you do. They look at what your website looks like and how professional it is. So if you're using one of these free websites, like is it Pixabay, there's Unsplash, there's several of them, and great, they don't sell, sorry, I'm so used to people buying images, they don't sell you, they give you free images. I don't know, I wouldn't use them anyway, because you could use one and your competitor could be using the same image.
I think that from my professional side, the SEO side of things, it is said that people can spot stock images and they don't make the same appeal. So yeah, you're right there, especially so if there's a totally free one, and we use a free term advisedly, one out there, then that's liable to be used by lots of people, so your website doesn't stand out. When you start paying for them, less people have them, but it's still not as good as having one taken by a photographer. But I think,
yeah, you're right. But there are a lot of stock agencies out there who are very specialist. And they are as good at, because they're run by photographers. So you know, you can't compare Getty or Shutterstock with, say, Food and Drink Photos, for example, or View Pictures, who just do or AWL Travel. There's different types of photo library.
I was just saying that the photographer one that you have is going to be totally unique, and where anything else is not likely to be unique. But getting back to the are they safe thing, and this is something that Graham pointed out to me that I looked into in great depth after his warning about using them. If you delve into the really deep terms and conditions of sites like Pixabay, and I've done it a few times, when you delve right the way down, embedded in their terms and conditions, and I must admit, for small print it's in bold, but it just says basically, if you get a copyright infringement notice through using one of the images you've taken from our site, you know, by using it, you have totally, you're not allowed to sue us for any problems you get into. So basically, if you get caught, because if someone puts on Pixabay for it, and there are others, or Shutterstock, whatever, they put it on there and they say, this is okay to use, Mr. Shutterstock, Mr. Pixabay. Pixabay go, okay, it's all okay to use. What happens if that image isn't okay to use? And then you get caught for using it. You can't go back to Pixabay or Shutterstock because they said, by using it, you said you can't sue us. So you're the one who holds the can. So even the free ones could, and I say could, be dangerous. So it's really, you know, it's a minefield out there, I think, of copyright entirely.
Yeah, I mean,
it's very worrying.
I put you onto that, Graham, didn't I? When you first called, I said read the terms and conditions. But one thing, Shutterstock are not a free stock library. Don't use Shutterstock. They are Pixabay, Unsplash. So what happens is with these photo libraries is people upload images. 99% of the time they're fine, they're okay. But there's a lot of images on there where someone who is not necessarily the license holder or the copyright holder has uploaded pictures. And if you use one and get caught, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen copyright infringement letters go out to people and they said, well, I've got it from a certain, I'm not going to mention any names, but I've got it from a certain free agency where I can download. And then the license holder said, well, I didn't put those pictures up there. They're not, the image is licensed. It's a stock image. It's and you have to pay. It's no excuse. So they are great. They have a role, but being someone who's spent 25 years working in the stock library industry, I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. There you go. I'm going to say it.
No, that's fair enough. Thank you for your honesty. I think that leads us nicely into the topic of what happens if you get a letter saying that you've infringed somebody's copyright. So Graham B, you've had personal experience of this, haven't you?
Yes. I had a lovely experience on the first working day of 2022. A letter, and I will use the name Pickerites because they're the ones who sent it to me, and everything I say is totally true and honest, and they can't quibble about it. They sent me a letter saying that there's an email rather saying they found an image on my website that had been placed on a blog in 2010 or 2012, one of the two. So it was 10 years ago at least, and this image, the size of a postage stamp, had been put on my website on a blog, as Graham said, by one of my staff against my instructions, because I said never use images off the web. Even back then I said don't do it because I was always worried about this very problem, but it had been done. I'd never seen it. Bang comes the thing in, and it's quite frightening when you get this because it's very legal. It says you use this image. They show you a picture of the image, they show you a picture of the website, they even tell you why they've got permission to use it, the copyright, however you want to call it, and they say you owe them, in my case it was £545 for 5 years, because I only limited it to 5 years for some possible legal reason. And I thought, wow, my first reaction was, I disagree with this. This seems to be just like a money machine making system, because I hadn't done it on purpose. But as Graham says, that image was owned by them, and therefore I shouldn't have used it. So, hands up, caught with a smoking gun, I shouldn't have done it. But I didn't think an image that size was worth that sort of money. Because they would say, well, basically, if you'd used it, you'd have to pay for it. And my answer to that was, well, if you'd have asked me to pay £500 for that image, I'd have said, go away, because I could buy one off other places for like £2, that were just as good. And even though the image was only 8% of the one they were selling, and it had been looked at 6 times in its entire life, as far as analytics goes, they said, doesn't matter. Copyright law says, you have used an image you did not have permission for. End of story, close the book, give us the money. And I sent all this data back saying, but it hadn't been used, it's tiny. Doesn't matter. And in the end, because I kept on saying, I disagree, they said, fine, it's going to our legal department. And it all went quiet. And I thought, oh, they haven't bothered, they've given up. And then a couple of months later, bang. And this is where they really throw on the pressure. And anyone who's seen these, they're so clever. They do nothing wrong, okay? Everything they do is 100% legal. But the way they do it, they really do turn the screws. For even little psychological things, the writing from the legal department will often turn into blue italic type writing, so it looks like it's been handwritten, and it's in blue so it stands out. And they really are saying, we've got you, pay up or you're going to go to court. And they keep on saying all the time, seek legal advice. And if you do seek legal advice, and I did, because Graham said seek legal advice when I asked him about it, everyone said just pay up and forget it. If you can, reduce the amount, they said. So even though I offered them a bit of money, said no, it's not enough. I offered a bit of money, said no, it's not enough. Eventually they came back with a reduction to 80% of it, about 450 quid, something like that. And I still didn't want to pay it, because I thought it wasn't worth it. Like, in UK law, from what I understand, and I'm not a lawyer, it's all about damages. So how much can they be said to have lost by your use of their image? And of course, damages can also be about, damaging brands, which we're into a totally different area of money here. But if they're just talking about the fact that you stole that money from them, in essence, by not paying for the image, they're limited in UK law. So, so I thought, well, it wasn't worth that amount of money, because I wouldn't have paid it. And so I still fought against it. But in the end, I thought, everyone's telling me to settle. They've given me 400 quid, but I still didn't want to pay it to them. And this, what happened next, to me, sums up the fact that this industry, while it should be there to protect the photographer, the owner of those things, it isn't. It's there to make money. That's my view. Because when I said to them, I said, look, I'm not willing to pay you the 450 quid, but I will pay it to the Ukrainian charity, because at the time the Ukrainians were screaming for money for the. I said, I'll pay it to them in our joint names. I will pay that money to joint names, And they said no. They said, we want your money. And to my mind, that summed it up, because they weren't interested in anything other than the pounds in their pocket. So I said to them, basically, I didn't say go to hell. I thought about it. I said, take me to court. I want this to go in front of a judge, because I want to know what damages you should really be getting. And only the judge can actually assess that. You can't assess it. You can demand what you want. I can say what willing to pay. I said, but the judge can decide. And I want this heard, because whatever happened, whether I'd lost, I still might go to court, I don't know, haven't heard anything. Whether I lose or win, I will have proven what happens to people like me who use an image totally by mistake. It wasn't malicious.
Yeah, that's really,
and that's what,
yeah.
and that, but at the moment they're sending out these letters and people are paying them because they're told to pay them. But really, is it just treating businesses as an ATM machine? And that's my concern.
Okay, no, thank you, Graham. I guess I'd just like to come in here and say that if you're an FSB member, you've got access to our legal advice line. So, you know, if you do get something like this, then do ring them up. We do have legal experts who can help you, and that's included in your membership. But Graham, other Graham, what's your professional opinion on this then? And how should people, well, I mean, just how should people approach it when they get it?
So what I was going to do is, well, Graham, so I was going to talk through the process, what happens when, you know, so you wake up one morning on a Monday, you go into work, and suddenly you have your first cup of coffee, and you think, right, lovely, they open your post. So the process will start with the receipt of a letter. This letter will be from a company that represents a photographer or a stock photo library. A stock photo library, if anyone doesn't know, sells pictures on behalf of photographers, but, you know, licenses them to you. So you receive a letter and saying you owe a certain amount of money for using an image without a license. So these companies use very, very powerful image recognition software where they can find an image. So on that letter will be a picture of the image as appears on the photo library website. It will be all on the photographer website, and also will be an image as it appears on your website. So you can't get away with it because they've got a screen grab of it being used on your website. So the first thing to do is I'll have a lot of people contact me and say, Graham, I've had a letter, it must be a scam. It's not a scam. I've said at the beginning, every photographer and every stock library has a right to defend their copyright. They do. Simple as that. You can't use an image. And also being not understanding the process and is no excuse. You know, it really isn't. If someone has sent you an image and you've used it, or you've got onto a search engine like Google, no excuse. You know, just assume every image is copyrighted. If everyone assumed that and went through the right process, this would never happen. But Graham does make a point. I work with photographers, and I think there's a way of resolving this amicably. You know, what happens with a lot of these companies, they come in and they say, right, you owe us this amount of money, you owe us this amount of money, you owe us, it's it's thousands for one image. I've dealt with companies who've had 10 images. It would finish you as a company unless you had a lot of, you know, pennies in your bank account. But one thing that I've noticed recently that a lot of these infringement companies don't do is that they should have a breakdown of each fee that they're charging you. And I'm not a lawyer, but I have a lot of experience dealing with the legal side of this. So under UK copyright law, I wanted to show you, you know, this is, I'm going to actually state the law. So it's section 77 to 79 of the UK Copyright Design and Patents Act. And it's created in 1988. So this protects any creator of an image. So they would be entitled to charge you for the price had you purchased the image legitimately. So say if you had thought, right, I love this image, I want it on my website, I'm going to go onto a stock agency or contact a photographer. How much would it cost me to use it on my website? So commercial website use, or including social media. So that's the fee. More often than not, because you didn't know you were infringing, you haven't given the photographer a credit. Now, under UK copyright law, the photographer is morally entitled to a credit to their image, or not the photographer, or the photo library, or even better, the photo library and the photographer. So again, they can charge you up to 100% of the initial fee for not crediting them. really important actually, unless you have an agreement not to credit them, you have to credit them because it's their work.
But some people think that just crediting them gives them the right to use it, don't they?
They do. That happens so often, particularly on blogs. This image comes from this photographer. I'm giving them a credit. Well, I've given you a credit. Aren't I nice?
Yeah.
Well, no, because no one reads your blog probably. Let's be honest. You know, get over yourself. And secondly, the photographer doesn't really care. And so,
can I just come in at this point, because we've got an interesting question on that point about how do you? So someone has asked about using Wikimedia. Commons.
Wikipedia, yeah, Wikimedia Commons, yeah.
Yeah, and but also like sort of saying like they're not very clear about how to credit things correctly. So what should you do if you're trying to? So if you're using an image that you believe is in the public domain, or the copyright owner has allowed you to use in the public domain, like what's the correct way to credit somebody?
I looked at the question, and there was, I think a photographer mentioned that Graham wasn't technically correct about the images on Wikipedia, and I have to say they're probably right. I'm not an expert on what images can and cannot go onto the public domain. I know after 70 years, but also you can allow your images to go into the public domain before then, because you may not want to be getting a commercial aspect from your images, so they can go into the public. So that's a bit of a grey area, and it's very difficult to know which images appear in public domain and which don't. But the point is, once they do appear in the public domain, they don't make it very easy. I have to be honest. You have to, when you see an image, some people just see it and go public domain, right, use it, download it. What I've suggested is just scroll down, keep scrolling down, and at some point below that image, it will say to you, copy and paste this license, and there will be a link. If you use that link, you should be okay, because that link should then give details of the initial copyright holder and whoever owns the image now, or whoever doesn't own the image now. But again, what it will say is this image is part of the Creative Commons license, basically, and it's a standard. So all I'm saying is, when you see the image, just scroll down. It would always be there somewhere, and it comes in different forms. But don't just see the image, right click and use it. Have a look at the information below and read it, because every image is different. Every image has a different Creative Commons license. There isn't just one, there's different ones. Can it be? Some allow it for use for commercial use on a business website like the FSB. Some will only allow it for editorial use, so in a newspaper or magazine, because that's not commercial. You're not promoting a product. Some people won't want their images on a business website because it's promoting a product, maybe a product they don't agree with, for example. So just be really careful. Scroll down, read it.
Can I just come back as well on something, because I do want to make it perfectly clear that people like Picture Rights, when doing this, are doing things in a legal manner.
Yeah, they are.
I think it's entirely, they are every right to do what they're doing. It is just the manner in which they do it, and should they pursue people who do things by mistake in the same manner that they pursue people who do things maliciously? That is the big question.
And that's a good question, actually, because we've had a couple of questions in from people about, if I did it totally inadvertently, I took it down straight away, is that okay?
No. So if you take it down, first of all, going back to what we were talking about before, Ruth, if you receive it, take it down, take the image down. Don't assume it's a scam, because it's not. But also, it's very important, don't just take the image off your website, take it off your server. It's two very different things, removing it from your website and removing it from your company server, because if you don't remove it from your server, it can still show up in historical searches. So you need to remove it. But no, what if you think about it from the photographer's point of view, why on earth should you get away with it just because you've removed it? You've still been using it. So let's go back to that company who are using the roast dinner. How many roast dinners have they sold because they've had a beautiful picture of a roast dinner on there? I've removed it now. I don't care. It doesn't matter. And a photographer can claim, it's called it's like they can claim for, if it goes to court, they can claim for damages, where they can look at a company and say, how much money have you received from the use of my image? This is how serious it is. It's not just I don't think some businesses take it seriously, go, oh, I'll just remove it. It's actually, and it can also actually become a criminal issue, not just a civil issue, because if you have used that image knowing full well that it was copyrighted, and the photographer can prove that, if, say, for example, someone said to you, you shouldn't really use this, or this image was obviously a stock image and you've used it, actually it can turn into a criminal offence whereby you have maliciously used and breached copyright.
I think it's a good point in there, just to go back to that. If you do go to court, like in my case, it still could go to court. I haven't heard for months. Then you do, if they're claiming less than £10,000 on current rate, it goes to like a small claims court.
Yeah.
In the intellectual property.
Yeah.
And there's no costs involved in 99% of cases.
No.
But if you're being above £10,000, it goes into another higher court, where and then your costs could go up to £50,000.
Yeah.
So basically, apart from the damages you could be taken for, it can involve a huge amount of money, and this is really why don't do it in the first place. This is the message.
This is what I'm hearing. Is it
don't do it in the first place, because then you won't get into this problem like I did. It's you walked onto a mine, it's gone boom. Don't go into the minefield. That's the simple thing.
Well done, Graham. Brilliant.
No, good point, Graham. I think that's the whole message of this webinar. Don't do it in the first place.
Yeah.
Make sure you follow the procedures. And we've got loads of questions, and I'm aware we've only got 10 minutes left. So if I may, I'm going to just whiz through some questions. And let's try and keep the answers as brief as we can, so we can get through a lot of them. We've had a few questions about, what if you take a photo of a painting? Does the image of the painting then belong to you in your photo, or how does that work?
It's difficult. No, it doesn't. So let's an example very quickly. Say if you went to a national trust and English heritage are shockers, or actually the other side of the story is great for protecting the copyright. So take a picture of a national trust property and sell it, you're in trouble. Take a picture of a painting and sell it, you're in trouble. It's not you can't take a picture of. But then there's another side we won't go into. If that painting is over 70 years old and it's not in it's in the public domain, you take a picture of it. It's quite, there's not always black and whites in copyright.
So you maybe need expert advice on it. So
yeah. So basically,
what about if you someone else has asked, can you trace around someone else's image using online software and use it as a base for your own images?
Yes. Go into Google Images, pop an image in, and it will tell you, there will be a list of where that image is being used. So Google Images, you can put an image into it, basically. So if they were your images, that's a very easy way.
Sorry, I mean physically trace around it and use it as a template for your own image, not trace where an image is. Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't know. I don't understand the question really. So if you trace around just an image and use it, it was someone else. Oh, you're taking
so you're using someone else's image, but you're drawing your own version of it, I guess. And we have a similar thing about copying logos.
I understand what you're saying.
Copy people's logos with your own.
No, do not do that, because if you could see, if it's a direct representation of that image, no, you can't, because you're copying someone else's work. And don't use it in the company logo, for God's sakes, because everyone will see it.
There's another question which is from Caroline saying, I work for a charity and often receive photos from community projects to use with blogs and on our website. Do we need to get written permission from them to use the photos, or does them sending it to us imply permission?
No.
And do you need to credit the photographer with all those photos?
First of all, charities are shockers for using other people's images, and then they say we're a charity, we can't afford it, we don't have to pay, and the photographers don't care if you're a charity or not, you still have to pay. So no, basically if you're a charity, get permission and find out where that image has come from. If you're sent images from somebody else, that photographer shot that image for the other person, not for you, and they will just as happily go after a charity for copyright infringement as any other company. And so get permission and be very careful, because charities especially have images coming. I do understand have images coming in from everywhere. And also another thing for charities, just very quickly, is property and model release. If you're taking pictures of people who are involved with your charity, say if you're a wheelchair manufacturer and you have somebody in your wheelchair, make sure you've got a model release if you use it on your website.
I gather that even buildings can have that requirement as well.
Yeah, property release. You can't take a picture of the building.
That goes to the National Trust properties, doesn't it? I guess.
You can't take a picture of a property you can take a picture of a skyline, but if you're going to take a picture of a property and use it on your logo, you're going to get into trouble. Of course you are. I mean, it's common sense. Yeah, you will.
Fair enough. Okay, so another question is, some stock libraries offer a free trial. So if any images have been downloaded during that time, does the usual license apply, or are there other rules?
No, it should. I mean, obviously, each stock library is different, but legally, if they've given you a free trial and they're saying you can download the images, then yes. And also, don't forget, there will be a record of the images you've downloaded, so you will have come back with that. It's not the same as right-clicking on Google or something. If you've downloaded an image from a stock library, and they then come to you and say, well, you've used it. Well, you say, well, I was part of your free subscription, so you'll be covered. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just having a look. Okay. So and just someone querying again, it doesn't matter where you use it, whether it's on social media, on your website, whatever, you're covered in the same, like it's the same, you've got the same responsibility to make sure that you use an image responsibly.
Yeah, you've got the same responsibility. Copyright infringement is everywhere. I mean, they're only finding it online. So if you used it in a print document, you'd be on, but it's not. It's the same process. You still committed copyright infringement, but if someone accidentally saw your brochure, but they can't trace that, but you're still committing it.
We're going into another area, but it's a good one to bring it in. I've heard of people who buy an image for the use on their website, and then they go and use it on a book cover, right, or on mugs. Now, the license they probably bought it for is only for use on the web. As soon as you start using it on printed items, then it's a totally different license.
Yeah, well,
and that's a different area of copyright, but it's an important one for people to realise.
Unless they're buying a royalty-free image, and we didn't cover that just quickly. Royalty-free does not mean free. Royalty-free means you're downloading an image by size. You normally get a small, medium, large folder. It's not free. Royalty-free just means you can use the image as you like, pretty much. Then you get a rights-managed image where you buy an image if you're buying it for a book cover or a magazine or whatever, you can only use it within those parameters. But royalty-free does not mean free.
And it still doesn't mean that someone else hasn't got a copy of that license that you don't know about.
No.
Because as we just said, it could be uploaded by someone who doesn't own it.
Yeah. No, royalty-free doesn't. If you're using royalty-free from a stock library like Shutterstock, whatever, that's fine. You can use that.
But is it not possible it's been uploaded? No, Shutterstock. No. I'm talking about Pixabay. They have royalty.
Oh, that's not royalty-free. That's free.
Oh, okay. So there's another thing. The difference between royalty-free and free gets even worse.
No, royalty-free is not free. You still buy a royalty-free image. You're still buying that image. Free is free. Royalty-free just means you can buy it.
I've seen free royalty-free image adverts on the web.
No, I don't touch those with a bug.
It gets worse.
So Vivo, so the points I'm taking for this are, make sure that you have permission to use a photo, make sure you credit it correctly. And if you work with a photographer, make sure that you have an agreement from them as to what you can use the photos for and how long you can use them for, so that you know that you're covered with what you're doing. We've had a couple of questions about things like GIFs and memes and things on social media where, you might have an image for a film or a TV show, but people add their own captions over it because it's sort of a funny thing to do and it helps with customer engagement. Presumably that's a problem too, because you haven't got permission to use that clip. Or how does it work with that? Do you know?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure, because there's so much of this on social media. I cannot imagine that anyone is going to take every single person who's created a GIF. Certainly not for using it. Maybe the creators should be brought up for creating but how many, it would take over your life. You can't, you would not be able to track down every single person who's reposted it on social media and everything. So I do think that's slightly different. I don't think that would be an issue. And technically, yes, if you really want to go for it, but I think copyright infringement companies are just looking at businesses at the moment.
I also think they're looking more at websites rather than social media because of the ephemeral nature of social media.
Yeah, they are.
And it's easier for their spiders to
But it doesn't mean you won't get into trouble if you do change their course. So it's probably... Yeah,
they should probably not create them in the first place. You would hope they've got copyright in this. But, if you were to say, my 19-year-old daughter, I'm sure she's not going to get caught for copyright infringement.
Okay.
No.
So I've got a question here from Agnes that says, I'm a proofreader and occasionally take pictures of typos I run across, which I'd like to use to illustrate why you should use a proofreader. One of those typos is on a greeting card. I take it I would need to ask the card publisher or designer for permission if I wanted to use a picture I took of their card on my website.
Yes, definitely, because not only are you taking a picture of their card, you're pointing out something they've done wrong, so they might not be overly impressed. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, just check. I mean, again, check. It doesn't do any harm to check, does it?
No, I think that's good. Okay, so we're having some questions about how Graham's case ended, which I don't think yours has ended yet, Graham, but
No.
Graham E, how would you suggest, like, what is the best way to approach it? Do you say you should just pay? Do you say you should contest it? What's your, we've only got about 3 minutes left.
Okay, well, you're going to have to pay something. Very unlikely, so you have a choice. So what it is, don't assume it's a scam, contact them, take the image off your website, take it off the server. They should have an amicable settlement fee. I've noticed now more and more of these infringement companies don't have an amicable settlement fee. You come back and say, okay, this is what I can afford to pay. Do you have a fee? If I pay within 14 days, I want to pay this amount. And then if they're still playing, if they're still being difficult, well, not difficult, they're still sort of saying that, we want the full amount, you can take it to court, and there's only so many things that they can charge for. What you must do is ask them for a breakdown of the fees that they have charged. They can't just come up with a big whopping great figure at the end and go, you owe us £4,000. You go, well, where did you get that from? So you can then go through each of those fees and look at them and say, well, you're entitled to charge this, you can charge this. So they are to protect the photographers, these companies, but they're not a money-making machine. There's two very different things. And there's a way of solving these issues without going to court, basically. So don't panic. Yeah, don't panic. Don't, but one thing don't assume it's a scam, because it isn't. It really isn't. And get advice from me or from anyone else.
No,
I think the basic message, if you want it to go away quickly, see what limited money they'll take.
Yeah.
And if you think that's reasonable, then pay it. If you're like me and decide that you want to contest the whole thing to try and find out what is a reasonable level of damages for everybody, then force them to take it to court, because that may create a bit of like a way forward for everybody, if you see what I mean. It clears the air. Yeah. But I don't know whether they're just forgotten about, because sometimes they go away from awkward people, according to
very, very quickly. They do go away from awkward people, because they're moving on to the next case and the next case and the next case. So you may find, Graham, and you may never hear from them again. Yeah. And that's awful, isn't it? Because they should give closure, but you may not.
So both Grahams, what's the lasting message you'd like people to take away in our last minute of this webinar? What's the one thing you think people should do?
Okay, don't ever assume an image is free. Never download an image off the internet. If someone gives you an image, don't assume it's free. Check it's a pain in the bottom, I understand, but check, because you don't want a letter on a Monday morning. You really don't. It ruin your week.
Thank you.
Yeah, same thing, really. Only use an image that you've got you paid for, that you've got a record for, you've had it taken yourself. And if you do get given an image by somebody else, then only use it when you're totally sure that you've got the person who took it permission so to use.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I do apologise to everyone. We've had so many questions. We've just not had time to get through them all. We are going to put the contact details up for both the Grahams at the end, and I'm sure they'd be happy to speak to you if you wanted to get in touch. But I'd just like to thank Graham Everett and Graham Bayliss so much for your time today. It's been a really interesting session, and I've certainly learned a lot. And I think the overwhelming message is, try and do it right at the beginning, so that you're not worried that you're going to get one of these letters and have all the stress that poor Graham has been going through trying to get his sorted out. I'd just like to do a little plug for our Trustpilot. If you found this webinar useful today, we'd love it if you put a review for us on Trustpilot. So please do think about doing that. And just a reminder that we have recorded the session today, so it will be available on our on-demand page on our website if you want to watch it back. So thank you everybody who's participated today, and good luck with your images going forwards. And thanks very much. Have a good rest of your week.